Hey, good Monday morning to y'all. Welcome to the Common Good Podcast. Doug Pagitt here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's Dan Deitrich right there, if you're watching on the video.
That's right, South Bend, Indiana.
If you're just doing this in your ears and you don't know what any of this looks like, you just create your own little vision of where you think this is. So I'll just point. There's Dan. He's right there. South Bend, Indiana. Dan, I'll tell you what, it's a big day here in my little town. Edina, Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis. I always say Minneapolis because I'm 150 feet from Minneapolis, but actually the town I live in is called Edina. And today, the big yellow tubes of parental freedom came rolling down the road. And children got on. Stranger took them away to be in a finally appointed classroom somewhere. And parents breathed a sigh of relief and a sense of 6 hours of glorious freedom. So big day, of course, for the teachers, as you know, being from a family of teachers.
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, first day of school around here for these, which is a big deal where I'm from, because it used to be that schools could not start before Labor Day by edict of the law of the state of Minnesota.
It was the same in Michigan.
Forbidden.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. Unshakable. One of the truths of our educational system is that we will start after Labor Day because the kids have to work the fields. They got to get that harvest in. And then the Minnesota State Fair ends on Labor Day. So you got to fill up the Minnesota State Fair.
Yep.
And not anymore. They about 6 years ago, maybe longer. I don't know. I'm old. I just say years, in the past. But some number of years ago, they changed this for some one-off reason. And just like any kind of change in a systemic structure, one little change just opens the door. And so now here they are a week ahead of time, already off at school. And
well, I'm here in Indiana where my kids have been in school for 3 weeks now.
Seriously? Is Indiana one of those start early August places? What?
Yeah.
Why is this? I know some places they do that, and it also has to do with the agricultural schedule because they're in heat and other things. But why do they start?
I don't know exactly what the rationale is, but we get out in early June, so that's kind of nice.
Yeah, I don't remember now when the kids get out, but our neighborhood kids and the parents were out with standing at the bus stop. I went waddling out there and stood around, like the awkward just guy on the street that's out with the kids. And so big day. So wherever you are, whether your school schedule is starting in a week or it's been going for weeks, the sigh of relief from parents and the thrill of the bus drivers and the school personnel and the teachers, along with all the concerns that there are about, COVID and all the rest. Kids stand out there with their masks, and there's a lot of hope here in Minnesota, at least, that they're going to be able to do a full school year without having to send people away into remote learning. And I don't know what the protocols are now. Last year, the protocols were if a kid had COVID, tested positive in your class, they shut that thing down. Everyone went home and went remote. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's the plan anymore. One of the things I realized, once our kids are out of school and not being married to a teacher or an educator, anyone in the education industry, just really stop paying attention to schools. Man, it's unbelievable.
You can just check out.
Grandkids. Yeah. Just fortunately, people were talking over the weekend about school starting tomorrow. I wouldn't even have known to go pay attention to this because I, thought it started after Labor Day. But lots of things, and we'll catch you up here on the news as we see it. A little common good news. We'd like to connect people with that. But let's give you a little update on what's going to happen on the podcast over the next number of months, because this is Doug here, I will be off on the We the People ride, biking from San Diego, California to St. Augustine, Florida, from saint to saint, visiting the saints along the way. And boy, we're going to play that up when we get into New Orleans and the Saints come rolling in. I'm already.
I'm already cringing.
We're not there until late. I think we're there. I think we're literally there on Halloween. And so thinking about the people in New Orleans today, of course, because of the big hurricane, but we'll get to that in a minute. But the ride is starting. And because of that, we're going to make some adjustments in the programming here on the podcast. Politics Day is going to move to Mondays. On Tuesday nights, we're going to have a live stream from the ride wherever we are with some video recorded pieces and some audio pieces. So you can consider yourself invited to tune in to live streams and all this on Tuesday nights. Wednesdays is going to stay our faith day. Thursdays, you're going to hear from lots of other people. Sometimes some guests, sometimes other podcasts. One of the things we're going to be doing is introducing you to other podcasts that we think fit into the same genre of the Common Good podcast. So that'll be great for people. And if you listen here on the video stream, we'll find a way to push that to you too. It might not be as dynamic as this, where there's an orange border and changing camera angles and top-notch video quality. But we'll find some way to play an audio and put an image up to pretend it's a video so that you can, you shouldn't have to change a thing. You just sit back and relax and let us take care of all your Common Good podcasting and live streaming stuff. So that's all coming up. And we'd love to have you join us, of course, on the We the People ride any way that you can. You can come down and join us. You can be part of a virtual ride. Big fundraiser is going to launch this week. I know I've been teasing this one out, and we got to hurry up because we start in a couple of weeks here. September 10th is our first meetup day in San Diego, where we experience, along with the people who live on the border on both sides, a number of their life conditions. Then we start riding on September 11th. And there's a reason. Tune in Wednesday. We're going to talk a little bit about this, about why we're starting the ride on September 11th, because the way we manage our border, our immigration and border practices were redefined 20 years ago after September 11th. Mm-hmm. Much of the rationale for why we build the wall the way we do, why we limit the number of people who can come in this country, why we've militarized the border so that the interaction that people from other countries have with our country is through our military system, all roots itself back to September 11th. That's still the narrative that's driving all of that. And so we're going to start the ride there on that day. And now there's some ways that you can be involved. You don't have to feel like you're just sitting it out or watching a bunch of people. We'd appreciate a donation per mile. Dan, we came up with three reasons that people could fund us. And you're a big part of this with the language. We're going to ask people to feed our faces. I did a calculation, like how many calories do you burn biking 50 miles a day? And by the way, calorie burning, what a boondoggle this thing is, trying to figure out how many calories someone burns. It's just, make-believe math. It's, this is just funny math. What was the stuff they said about Al Gore back at the Social Security lockbox days? The funny math or the new math or something like that. But it's confusing. But people do make these calculators online, and you put in your number of minutes you're going to be moving, your weight, and a biggest thing that has to do with how many calories you burn is how much you weigh. If I'm a bigger person. I weigh 230 pounds, and if you weigh 230 pounds, you burn like 2.5 times as many calories as somebody that weighs 112 pounds. I don't really know how that all works. It doesn't make any sense to me anyway, but we're going to be burning a lot of calories, somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 calories on these rides. So anyway, we invite people to help feed our faces because maybe you want to chip in a banana, or you want to be sure that we have some fresh fruit or some watery vegetables, something like that. So you can feed our faces. You can help us fix our flats. We're going to get flats along the way. So we'd appreciate you chipping in that way. We'll use the money to repair our bikes and keep our bikes in working order so we can keep telling the story of the people that we meet as we travel along. And the third is you can fuel our fleet. See, we're traveling with, well, it's not really a fleet. It's 2 vehicles, one pulling a trailer, but to us, it's a fleet. So you can help to fuel that. So that helps us carry our equipment, have stuff for events while we travel, have recording equipment, all that to make all this happen. And an RV that we'll use to live in and make our way across the country. So you can fuel our fleet. And we're adding a fourth, Dan. You don't even know about this one yet. Yep.
More Fs?
More Fs. More FOF. Because maybe people are picking up what's going on here. You can feed our faces. I'll be real slow. I'll get Rachel Maddow about this. You can feed our faces. See that? FOF. You can fix, say it with me, our flats. You can fuel our fleet. And you know what else you can do, Dan? You can fund our flick. Fund our flick. We're producing a documentary out of all this with an award-winning documentary film makers, and they've already started shooting some promotional material for it. Because we went on some scouting trips, so you'll see that. We'll be releasing that in the next day or so. So wherever you see this, you will see that. If you're only listening, you're going to have to go over to someplace on YouTube or I don't know, Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, one of those places, and you'll see the video that'll come out. But we're going to produce a documentary about this whole thing. We're looking for people to help us fund it. It costs a lot to do a documentary, so fund our flick, feed our faces, fix our flats, fuel our fleet. Oh boy, I can feel it.
A lot of great alliteration.
There's some alliteration. We're gonna roll up our sleeves and we're gonna keep this thing going. I bet we'll hit 7 or 8 FOFs by the time we get done with this. It's gonna be a big FOF
easily, yeah.
Because when the alliteration strikes you, it just there's no stopping it. It just keeps coming. Having a little fun with that, but also kind of serious. We really would love your donation. Per mile is great. Some people just like to set an amount and say, you're going to travel 3,223 miles is our current estimation, but maybe you just want to make it a flat $50,000 contribution. Just feel free. Or if you want to do a penny a mile, something like that, you want to do, $32.23. That's a great amount. Maybe you want to do $1 a mile, something like. But anyway, you pick your amount. You can go over to We the People Ride, Vote Common Good. Anywhere you start clicking around there, you'll get to donate buttons, and you'll find the places where you can do this. Pledge it, and they can share with your friends in all kinds of ways. So we'd love to have you along with us. Mm-hmm. That's all starting again on September 10th, and so it's coming quick. It's a week from Saturday. So the podcast will change a bit, but we think it's all going to be for good. Hey, and on that note, Dan, have you started watching this Netflix documentary called Immigration Nation?
I have not.
Boy,
I would love to. You've been talking it up, but I just don't know if I'm emotionally ready.
Well, I think that's wise to check yourself on that because it is difficult to watch. Mike Stavlin, all-time listener here, is kept me going with it because I was just feeling hard. It was just hard to keep watching it. It's 6 episodes long. It's about 45 minutes to an hour long episodes, and each one of the 6 takes on a different topic from a documentary film crew that embedded themselves with ICE over a 2.5-year period of time. And the access that they received and the stuff they were able to record and get into this documentary is riveting and disturbing. This is all 2017, 2018, 2019. So it's all about the Trump policies, but it's bigger than that. It's also about our long-term approach to immigration and to ICE enforcement. I will just say it is really, really worth watching. Like if you're saying to yourself right now, I have an hour, just go on to Netflix, stop listening to this, go on to Netflix, pick any one of the 6. You can start in order. You don't have to go in order. It's not a documentary that requires you do it. You could watch these in any order. I happen to watch them, 1 through 6. The 6th one is about part of the country that we're going to be spending a lot of time in Ajo, Arizona, Nogales, Mexico, the places that we were already where our trailer for our documentary was shot and where we're going to spend a significant amount of time. This is documenting people who are pushed into the desert and then they can't survive trying to cross the desert and all the thousands of people who die. And that is an understood and accepted policy of the United States to use the desert as deterrence. It's just and it's interviews with people impacted and with people in ICE, and it will bring you in. And look, I think it's worth the difficulty of watching it. It's not going to feel inspirational. It's not like one of these documentaries where at the end you say, oh, now I know what we need to do on immigration. I think you will have the experience at some point where you'll say, what should we be doing? This is just so broken.
But I think that's sort of the point of our We the People ride, is to talk with experts on the ground and people that know intimately the struggles of the border and have ideas for a better way forward. So
that's our hope. We hope we sort of find these little seeds the future, but believing that there's always a better way forward and that people know it. And like so many things in our society, it's not the amount of something that exists, it's how well distributed it is. And the plans for the future, the ideas about how we should go forward, people know, they're just not shared widely enough, right? Not because the people who know them are not trying to share them. It's just very, very difficult to do this. And I think documentaries are incredibly powerful way for people to make change in their own thinking. I've become very convinced that in this age we live in, when documentaries are better than ever, there's more of them than ever, people are better at watching them than ever and knowing how. It's really powerful, and this one, Immigration Nation, is spectacular.
Yeah.
I think only to be followed up by the We the People Ride documentary as
Close
sort of
second.
the two greatest documentaries on immigration to ever be created.
But I think it's all a part of helping to create the political will to make change, because a lot of these things, we know the system's broken, that's agreed upon. Left and right are like, yeah, this is a mess. But there's no political will to actually dismantle the system and try something different, because no one wants to touch it. And so it's up to us to demand that we address these issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And have some very important and difficult conversations with ourselves about what we've been doing and why we've been doing it in this country. It's, and this is one of the few issues that really over the last 30 years, 35 years, sit so nearly evenly across political perspectives. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, big government, small government, smart government, dumb government, all of it, all the approaches you take to your political life, they all have contribution into why our immigration system is the way that it is. So, and I actually, for a long time, I thought that was therefore a way to come to agreement that we should change it. What it's actually done is now no one feels the need to fix it. You see that? Like, there it is. Like, well, it's not on us. It's kind of this, this thing is spread evenly around. The solutions might not be evenly distributed, but the blame is. And when in the documentary, the Immigration Nation documentary, you'll see clips from Clinton, you'll see clips from Bush, you'll see clips from Obama, you'll see things from obviously from Trump. You don't see anything about Biden because this was created before that, but it's not hard to fill in the blanks of where all those things sit. And I am not making moral equivalency to how bad Donald Trump's administration was. This documentary is laser clear at the level of intentional cruelty and evil pushed by that administration in the issue of immigration. While everyone has some level of responsibility, the Trump administration carries the greatest weight for human suffering of immigration in this country by, a whole other class. I'm not at all saying that everybody's in the same level of culpability. Their choices, very specific choices that are still impacting people today.
Intentionally cruel. Like the cruelty was the point.
And they just dismantled and restructured things to make it difficult for decades for people who are trying to come into this country. So it is, elections have consequences. It's brutal. But that doesn't mean that it's just only their problem. One of the reasons that Trump could utilize immigration in the damaging, horrible ways that the administration did was because it was already so fraught and complex and full of the seeds of wrongness. So everyone's got to fix it. Everyone's going to feel a bit implicated by it. So. Yeah. Okay. So that's all coming. You're going to hear a lot more about that as we go. And the reason we talk about this so much this fall is I believe that it's one of the issues that faith voters are willing to move on. A lot of people who are going to vote for Republicans anyway, but their faith drives them to their way of living in the world. they're not comfortable with the way that Republicans treat immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers. It's one of the breaking points. It's one of the places where they disagree with the party. And we want to help them see that even more clearly and never become convinced that somehow the current approach by the current Republican imagination is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And we also need to lean into the Democratic lawmakers and the independents to make them aware that we really, really do need to see change here.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that are currently going to happen in immigration, the changes they're looking at, there's different classifications that people have for their status in the United States. And one of the issues is just so complicated and so full of acronyms and so difficult to understand. But there's two of them that they're really working hard on. One of them is called TPI and one of them is called DACA. And they're trying to make both of those permanent. That's absolutely urgent, so crucial, must do it. And it's not going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
These are dealing with some very consequential symptoms.
Yeah.
But they don't go nearly far enough.
They're
so we
Band-Aids.
have to do that. And then we have to move on to the other things. They're the ICU of this COVID thing. And we need a vaccine. We don't, and along with very good, ICU care for people that are in those.
Yeah. I'm a little worried that Democrats are going to make DACA permanent, pat themselves on the back, say we did it, and then not put any real effort toward the broader system. Very nervous about that.
Yes. And it's back in the news again, as Tracy DeVos says, because of Afghani asylum seekers and refugees that are coming. It's this is the right time to be having this conversation. It's going to be important for all of us because it's popped back up in the public consciousness. So here we go.
Yeah.
All right. So all of that coming over the next couple of months. I spent longer on that than we probably should have, but I'm kind of excited about what we're up to. Hey, yesterday was the 16th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. And that was the day when people in New Orleans and the other parts of Mississippi were again preparing for what this time was one of the most severe hurricanes to hit the United States. So how they measure severity has to do with like wind damage and rain and all this. It wasn't the flood problem that Katrina was, and the infrastructure has held in New Orleans and around Mississippi. But boy, this is a devastating hurricane and devastating effect on people.
Yeah.
And I just keep thinking about people who live in other parts of the world where they don't have the benefit of the infrastructure strength that we have, both because of code and because of the money to build roofs to build the tops of buildings in the way that are protected, or walls, or mitigation of water and all of this stuff. Just how damaging huge storms like this are.
Yeah, I remember being in Haiti shortly after the earthquake in 2010, I think it was. And there's no building codes, and so in helping to rebuild, a big thing was hurricane straps on everything. Like, it was rare for a home to be secured to a foundation and for the roof to be safely secured to the building itself. So just little things like that. It's like a 50-cent piece of metal that attaches, you use a bunch of them obviously, but just little things like that make the difference between devastation and inconvenience.
That is right. And most of us find ourselves living in a world where we're not generally afraid of the elements.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're an inconvenience, and occasionally there's a breakout, whether that's a fire or a flood or a storm, something. But for the most part, that's not normal to human history, and not even normal to most of the world. The elements themselves, the planet's behavior and action, the inanimate realities of fire and floods and winds and animals and all the rest, like that's the stuff you're really also afraid of. There's a lot of that, and we are only reminded on occasion about how devastating the earth can be to people trying to live on it. And I think about the indigenous peoples that lived in the same land, in the same places where people are now, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, hurricanes like this came through. They had no idea they were coming. I mean, now at least people can prepare. We can get out. Man, how people lived, I guess even 200 years ago in these places, how you lived when you didn't have radar to tell you that there's a big storm coming and you can prepare for it, and just not even knowing how to read the barometric pressure changes, and then make some scientific calculation. Like, we have come so far in our preparations, and they're still deadly.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know if we have access to any records of, like, you could wipe out entire villages by storms like this. That are 170 mile an hour winds and huge floods and rock slides and mudslides, and just wow, it is
right.
There are just moments when hurricanes like this come through, in addition to the very real pain to the people who are experiencing them. It's kind of this larger moment of, oh yeah, that's right, that's sort of how this can all go. So to all those people that are along the coast there, and man, those places have just, and I know a lot of people, I have some friends that talk like this. They're like, oh, people just need to stop living there. Like, just move out,
Right.
But you can't. Like, you've been there. That's it. That's where you live.
Yeah. I mean, and that's that statement comes from such a place of privilege. Like, that assumes you have the financial capability to uproot your life, find a new job and a new house elsewhere, and be able to.
And your whole family. Your whole family is going to do this. All the people that love you and care for you and just going to leave everything you've ever had, everything you've ever known, the graves of your ancestors. You're just going to leave those because. So people don't do that. They can't do that.
And even with evacuations, I've heard a lot of, like, why don't people just for precaution, leave town for the week? I was like, most people can't do that. Like, that's right. They can't drop several $1,000s for a hotel for a week. They can't miss work. They can't.
Yeah, where are they going to go?
Yeah,
where are they going to go? And what are you going to bring? And it's there's a lot of devastation and a lot of pain that's coming that way. Hey, speaking of that, also in the news, COVID. The Delta variant. Did you I've been making this joke about Delta Airlines and having trouble with it. Apparently the other day, the CEO of Delta Airlines, when addressing the employees of Delta Airlines, referred to it as the B1F1472 variant.
Yeah.
Like, never once calls it the Delta variant. Just goes to painstaking degrees to not call it.
Like, if he just doesn't say that word, people won't associate it with their airline.
Yeah, I've been joking around that, like, for Delta, they got to be like, oh, come on, seriously, you had to pick the Delta. I don't even know why it's called the Delta variant. Do you know what this is? I think
it's just like alpha, beta.
This is the
going through the alphabet or whatever.
Really, this is like the fourth variant or something. That's it.
I think so.
Well, fair enough.
And there was a gamma for a minute.
Was there a gamma? Was there a gamma?
I feel bad for the people that are named after hurricanes.
Yeah.
Like poor Ida, wherever she is.
She's Katrina.
Now she's got Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make these things like names that aren't normal people names.
Yeah, like what? Like colors or something? They should go with like
animals, mean animals.
Animals you don't like?
Yeah.
Bees.
Hurricane wasp.
Yeah, I guess you'd probably you'd be in a fight there. What I wonder why they did start naming these after people.
Yeah, I don't know.
That is I remember when this happened, when they went through this and they introduced the naming and different hemispheres and which names they use and all of this. Don't really understand hurricane or storms as a whole. And then don't they change their names from, like, when they're a tropical storm and then they become a hurricane, they get a new name or something? Or maybe they only get the name when they become a hurricane, like a rite of passage, this kind of thing.
Yeah, when you move from tropical depression to full-on hurricane.
Okay, Jim Eaton with a great little punny line. Jim, I love humor like this. He's wondering if they still serve Corona beer on Delta Airlines. Not too soon at all for that joke, Jim. Not because it's too early in the morning for a beer joke, or too soon for the Corona Delta variant. That's well played. Perfectly thought of. All right. So okay, COVID's alive. It's well. It's raging. Um, and guys like Rand Paul. Can I just be political for a second? He's the senator from Kentucky. The two cats from Kentucky. Which is Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul. These guys. Wow, a couple of peas in a pod. Is now trying to say the only reason we're not figuring out ivermectin as a real antidote to the symptoms of COVID, which is this deworming medication that the Federal Drug Administration and others are saying, please, human beings, don't take horse deworming medication for COVID. It's bad for you. But doctors are writing prescriptions for it. He's trying to say, well, it's only because people hate Trump that they aren't going to do full studies on ivermectin. That is, first of all, no, that's not how studies of therapeutics for pandemics are determined.
Right.
There's an entire, here's the thing. Can I just rant about the FDA for a minute? I'm a big FDA fan, and their treatment or consideration or sort of dismissal of what the FDA does across the spectrum of folks. People talk about the FDA as if it is the most whimsical, capricious, don't they're only moved by the most powerful interests available, right? Like it's, well, the FDA will approve anything that big pharma does for them, or FDA is not looking into this symptom of the vaccines because so and so, and FDA is holding back on studying the effects of ivermectin because they hate Trump. And like, people act as if the Food and Drug Administration is somehow able to spin on a dime and just make decisions based on all kinds of stuff that have nothing to do with science. They're pretty sure that the FDA people are not science related, are not science concerned, are not science committed. They're pretty sure that these cats, they're just sitting around waiting for pressure to come from some lobbyist somewhere. The theories that people share about how the FDA behaves and approves the use of food dyes or things that can be in our food system, or things that are going to be medically approved. They're pretty sure that all of that is really coming because of lobbyists. Now, I'll get a lot of email about this, I'm sure, and you can send it right over to, Doug@vocommongood.com or Pagitt@gmail. Send it along. I'd love to hear from you. Always nice to hear from people. This isn't how lobbyists work, first of all. Lobbyists are not just lobbying the Food and Drug Administration's structure. Lobbyists lobby congressional leaders, senators and congressmen and women, and the administration. They're not direct. Nobody at the FDA is getting something from Pfizer or anybody else about approving or not approving. I don't know how we've ended up with this idea that, like, the federal government at one hand is so cumbersome, is so antiquated, it can't catch up. But on the other hand, the FDA, this enormously large part of the full-time structure, non-elected structure of the government, is just, flipping through their email every morning and like, oh, let's stop that study. Let's start this one. Let's make sure that red dye B14 is approved. And even though they don't do it in the UK, and ...
Yeah.
It's just my rant about people thinking that the FDA, and this comes from super progressives that I know who don't like the way that our food system is not managed more strongly by the FDA. Comes from guys like me, but I don't argue against the FDA, who believes that mercury levels in our fish is at a dangerous level and needs to be stopped. It comes from people on the very conservative side of the spectrum who are pretty sure that the FDA is somehow passing through vaccines that are totally bad for humankind and are going to ultimately destroy all of us and magnetize our bodies until the electromagnetism just, dissolves our human structures. Like all of the across the board, every part of the world you go to, people are like, well, the FDA, I mean, those gats. Like, really? Do you know how slow and cautious and presumptive they need to be all the time? They're like the last people you would pick on about this. Like the FDA, I don't know. We should really get somebody on from the FDA, like an FDA spokesperson sometime, and just say, like, how's it going? How you doing over there at the Food and Drug Administration? Because the seat that I'm in, I'm watching people on all sides of the political and cultural spectrum just, drop kick the FDA as their rationale for doing all kinds of horrible things in our world. Now, is that a rant that's totally just me? Do you get that at all? Do you ever hear this? Do you ever pay attention? Do you?
I mean, I do feel like they're getting it from all sides. They can't win. Like, you approve the Pfizer vaccine. It was too fast. It wasn't fast enough. Someone dropped you a suitcase of money to approve it. Like, yeah.
Well,
but here's my question: where did they get the idea? Like, hey, there's this drug that gets rid of worms in horses. Who was like, I bet that's good for people against this virus that is not a worm. Like, what? Well, where did that come from?
Apparently, it's being used around the world. And the World Health Organization does not suggest that you use it, suggests that you don't use it. But sometimes when you're in other places in the world, and this is true just for a lot of medications have benefit in ways that they're not initially intended.
Sure.
So yes, we should mock the notion that a horse and pig dewormer is being used in human beings for the COVID virus, because that just feels like such a radical disconnect. But on the whole, it's not all that odd to have a drug be used for purposes different than its intended purpose, that it has benefits somewhere else. So
there's like a people version, right? It's just not as concentrated. Like, why can you not get a prescription for the people human version?
This is what I don't totally know, but what I suspect, just some of the things I've heard about it, is that it's much more plentiful and easier to get from your vet than it is to get from another doctor.
Because you have to probably prove that you have worms to get the people version prescribed.
And there's a lot of places in the world and a lot of places in the United States where veterinary clinics are far more plentiful than veterinarians are than our medical doctors. I mean, in the United States, the lack of rural doctors.
Yeah.
I just really hear, 30 Rock's little bit on rural juror when I say rural, because I can't seem to say it either. That's to you, Mia Pace. If you know Mia Pace, one of our musicians, travels with us. She jokes about the fact she can't say the word rural at all. Have you ever heard this? Have you ever heard heard Mia? It's hilarious. But in a lot of rural areas of the United States, doctors are really hard to come by, and pharmacies are hard to come by. Veterinarians, on the other hand, they're around. So I think that's also part of it.
Yeah. Tricia says you have to have a prescription from a doctor for the people version, and of course, it's not as potent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tricia knows a lot about this ivermectin. Tricia, how far down the ivermectin Rand Paul slide have you traveled on this one? And look, again, and I say this a lot. There are things that in our society we need to encourage people to disagree on, right? Disagreement, petitioning your government, speaking out against your government when it's wrong, saying to your fellow citizen, there's something you don't see here that I see. Don't mock me. You need to listen. That is essential to keeping us as a civilization, to keeping our democracy working. All of that you have to do. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form try to suggest that people should be silenced in their opposition to the government or to these important issues. And COVID treatments and COVID responses should be something that are in our public discourse. So when your neighbor, when your friend, when somebody on the street corner, when people put together a rally that says no to masks or no to vaccine mandates, all right, this is where we are as a society. We have to keep talking and negotiating and teaching and learning this thing out. We can't just simply say, someone said this is how it goes, everyone just believe it, and let's just move on.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a legitimate way for a society to function. So yes, we do need to keep going, and we need to keep asking questions and being challenged and challenging all of our officials. Absolutely, for sure. I mean, it's there. One of the wisdoms of the founders of this country was to put into our protections that we have the freedom of speech and the freedom to bring redresses against our government, that you can speak out against your government. Totally should be doing that. We should be off on that stuff and after it. While we're doing that, the FDA is not the place. I mean, just for the love, I'm not saying the FDA is perfect or anything, but just the stories in people's heads about how the government works and what people can get away with, and the idea that like these simple deals are being struck, and that's why such and it defies the conversation.
Yeah,
doesn't take it all that seriously in my view.
And I was trying to find it, but the last I saw there, it's not like they're not doing studies on this. There was like 27 studies either concluded or in process.
Yeah, see, then you get into it and you're like, yeah, that's not actually true. The thing you're saying, that we're not even looking at it.
Yeah.
The FDA does its job. Does it always get it right? Yeah, pretty much. Is there ever an exception? Sure. Yeah, but they just get it right. I was having this conversation with somebody I dearly love about whether the way the UK treats some food additives, especially colors, food coloring, and the way the United States does are really different. So in the UK, things are not allowed to be in food. In the United States, they are. And this is tied in one theory to the fact that the FDA is in the pocket of or unduly influenced by, and fill in the blanks, right? At that point, it's just the fill in the blank story of the little kids' books at the doctor's offices. So just, plug and play for the and it's actually much, much, much more complicated than that, about the role that a government plays in the decision of what its citizens do. Great point to cue up story from China at this point, that you brought, and this is why I want to talk about this one, because they're really tied together about how, and you can do an intro what's going on in China, but how the government should respond to issues of well-being. This is difficult, and that's part of what we're facing with COVID, and it's part of what we're facing with building codes when we talked about hurricanes and natural disasters. What power ought the government have? Recognizing that the government is a unique force in our society. Individuals, citizens work for the government and are endowed with powers that non-government officials don't have. And that's true at the state level, the city level, the county level, and of course the federal level. So you've got a lot of power that's given to the government. The ultimate is that the government can use its power to seize your freedoms, to arrest you, to confiscate, to do it right. So there's just, when we're dealing with the government, we recognize, okay, that's something different. And when the question is, what power should the government have to invoke its opinion on how people behave? That's worth talking about. So a long time ago, way back in the dark old days, people were allowed to, by freedom of choice, smoke cigarettes and cigars in enclosed public spaces. Mm-hmm. And the government said, yeah, I know it's an awkward thing. I know it's uncomfortable. I know you don't like to smell like this. Just don't go there. But you all got to figure this out. The government's going to stay out of it. Mm-hmm. Then information, scientific development, understanding came along, and the government said, Yeah, this is now in our category. We now know the damage of secondhand smoke. So people are being influenced. They can't not be influenced. So, and there was a big argument. State of Minnesota, where I live, was one of the first states to invoke an Indoor Clean Air Act. There was a lot of contentious arguments about who got to do this, and being compared to seatbelts and to, Nazi Germany all at the same time, just like COVID is today. So these big arguments, and now we've just all concluded, yeah, life is better. The government should tell people
that was probably
this
a
act
good
of
call.
well-being is a good thing, right? So, but we should have that all out, right? That's what you do. That's what you have out. And different countries have different standards of acceptability around what it takes to protect a person from harming themselves or from harming others. Mm-hmm. And this question all the time about where's our freedom versus where's the collective well-being, that's always having to be negotiated on the next topic. And sometimes on the old topics, we're kind of back at them again,
right?
Time and time again, which was why this Chinese, this story about Chinese government and video games.
So this is one solution to that question. How should a government respond to perceived threats to its citizens? China decided to limit video games to 3 hours a week for young people. So I think it's anyone under the age of 18 or 16. I think 16 is really extreme, and 18, you get a couple more hours a week. But they called it the opioid of the mind, video games, and decided for the betterment of society as a whole to basically ban video games for kids. So kids cannot play video games during the school week, and then they're limited to like 3 hours over the weekend. And obviously that is an extreme solution to what they perceive as a problem. And obviously it has, you can say for that's the good of society, but it also is for the good of the control of the government. The government's been trying to crack down on these very lucrative tech companies. China's home to one of the biggest video game companies in the world by volume, like of how much money they do. And so these tech companies, they make billions of dollars, and all of a sudden that is a threat to the government. And so there's been a lot of like tamping down on like how much money you can make in this industry. And it's not just video games, it's also been like online schooling. China's cracked down and really like put a few of these online teaching companies almost out of business, because there was a huge market for parents wanting their kids to do better in school, and so the kids would go to school and then they'd have a private online tutor, basically, oftentimes an English-speaking teacher.
I see. So they're gaining an advantage against the other students that can't have that or don't have it. So they're saying we're going to limit people being able to do that.
Yeah, so they just outlawed that, basically.
You
so
can't
you can't spend extra money on schooling. It sort of devastated this industry of online teaching and stuff. So
wow. Well, yeah, that's exactly it. So that China's saying, hey, kids are going to be limited to the amount of hours. Where in the United States, we say parents need to limit the amount of hours that kids are going to be on. And then we try to give parents advice, suggestions, and then some tools to help with that. And in China, they say, no, we're going to not let you do that. In the United States, we have some things we limit, right? The use of marijuana, limited in this country. In other countries, the use of marijuana is not limited. When I was in Germany a few years ago, I asked about getting an Advil from the people we were staying with, like ibuprofen. And they were like, yeah, we can get some. We'll stop on the way. So I'm like, okay. Thinking we're going to stop at a
the German CVS,
yeah. No, prescription. You have to go in and you can get 2 at a time, and it's limited the number you can get per week of ibuprofen. And I'm like, I order them in bottles of 500 or 1,000
Costco size tubs of ibuprofen
at my house. And the reason they do it there is because it's damaging and people can overdose on them. So all those painkillers are restricted because they could be used in a harmful way. And in the United States, we say, no, like you can get as many as you want, and you should just like we should use other forces to get you to not kill yourself or harm yourself taking too many of them.
Yeah.
But limiting how many you can get, we're not going to do that. But with Sudafed, we're now going to put the Sudafed back behind the register. You have to show your ID, and you can only buy a certain number of Sudafed in the United States because that's being used to turn into what was
meth,
it turned into?
I think.
Meth.
Yeah.
Is it meth? Yeah. So, right. So just in the drugs area or in time spent on things or any of the rest, this is what we're always negotiating out as a society is how much should the government say your freedoms are limited, and how much should we put on individuals to make those determinations?
Yeah.
And that's just one of the issues that we need to talk about in our society. And I know it's often referred to as the nanny state. People hear that phrase where a lot of times conservatives, especially libertarians, are like, we don't need some nanny state where the government's like our nanny that's telling us how to live our lives and all this. And so to some people, it's a nanny state. And to some other people, it's, no, there's just civilized ways of behaving that are going to be enforced by suggestion and then consequence by the government, like where you can build things and how you travel down the road, at what speed and in what direction. Like these are just things that make life better, and we should have them not be up to the freedom of a person to just do whatever they want.
Right.
And other things are going to be at the freedom to do whatever they want. We have to get good at having that conversation over and over. I hear a lot of people saying they want the government to limit what social media companies allow people to say on their platforms. You know, we should, what power do that? And that's a worthy conversation to have. We don't let them put up, social media companies don't let people put up things that are harmful of children and are hurt vulnerable people, or that are going to incite violence. Like there's a line. But how do we get to that line? How close to that line do we get to? Well, that stuff's all negotiated out all the time. That's the project of all of us, actually. See, and that's what I think needs to be in our public discourse, right? Is that we step back from a lot of these issues and say, okay, can we just acknowledge what's going on here? That we're having to determine how far we're going to go and how far we're not going to go.
Yeah. And that seems to be, the broader conversation. It's about masks. It's about vaccines. It's like, what are you willing to do for the common good? And that's kind of our whole deal around here. Is like, do we have to force people to care about the common good? Or can we just convince you that maybe a slight inconvenience, a slight, I hesitate to even call it a sacrifice at this point, because it's like wearing a piece of cloth on your face really isn't that much of a sacrifice. But what are you willing to do for the collective good, and what are you not willing to do? At what point should we make you do the right thing, like not smoke indoors? And at what point do we leave it up to free markets to decide or whatever?
Yeah. And look, this stuff can be massive and important, and people kind of get it. And then it can feel like it's chipping away at you and being petty. You know, people that complain about their local building codes, and they're like, I don't know, I just want to be able to like remodel my basement. Why do I have to check in with with the city? And why do they have to come in here and look? Well, there's actually a lot of reasons why the city wants to come in there. Like some of it is they want to collect taxes on any improvement you're doing. Some of it is, they want to make sure that the quality for the next buyer, that someone's not going to fraudulently be purchasing your house under fraudulent means because you told them that you had done some work and it wasn't up to snuff. And there's also just safety reasons. They don't want your house to burn down because of these things. There are reasons. And then it can go way overboard. There can be too much of that kind of stuff. There can be too many times where the people tell you, and we have a long history in this country of our government limiting people's freedoms far too much. The Chinese Exclusion Act of the 20th century, where it was until I think 1965, Dan, or 1966, before people of Asian descent could become citizens in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just let that settle in. The year I was born, you could not become a U.S. citizen if you were born in a country that was determined to be in the Asian Exclusion Act.
Yeah.
What? Like, the government doesn't let you do that for some reason? Oh, it is. There are just. This is what it takes to live with one another well, and so many of our common good issues, they come right back to this. And this is part of what, in the civic discourse, I think we need a lot more conversation about. People need to get better at. We need our politicians and other leaders saying to people, we're going to work on some practices as a nation, and this is one of those. Mm-hmm. How do we do this with one another? And so when you're feeling that overwhelming frustration, whether it's about hurricanes or Afghanistan or COVID or any of this, there's actually something you can do, which is to tune up your skills on how to be, how to American, as some people like to put it.
Yeah. Well, there's tons. Yeah, there's tons more news in the headlines, but I feel like that's probably a good spot to call it a day.
Let's call it a day. Yeah. It's a day.
It's a day. It's a Monday.
Well, we'll be talking tomorrow about politics. It's going to stay on Tuesdays until a couple weeks from now. But Rob Ryerson and I will be on tomorrow, and we'll talk a little bit about the political edge to all this stuff. So, hey, thanks all. Thanks Tommy. Thanks Tricia for all your good input. Jim, Barbara, Ray Allen. Let's see if I got Tim. We appreciate all of you being around for all of this, and Michael for being part of the podcast, and all of you are the live stream, and all of you listen to the podcast. We'd love to have you around as well, and we'll see you down the road.